Salutations, everyone. Welcome to another AOE podcast where today we're going to be talking about the next generation of consoles. Generation number 9 will be in full force coming this next week with the release of the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5. Although, fun fact, the Nintendo Switch came out a couple of years ago. So this generation has already started. A lot of people tend to forget about Nintendo for a number of reasons, but most of all, people tend to forget what generation they are. Because we got the Wii U, which is the same generation as the Xbox One and the PS4, and that came out a year earlier than those consoles. And we have the Switch, but came to be 3 years before the Series X and the PS5. So that is where we are right now. And obviously, people are talking about the differences between these two consoles, how they stack up. Console wars, right? Which one's going to be better? It's the same thing every time. And I'll say exactly what I said the last time I talked about consoles coming out, which was, 7 years ago. And I made a video about it, this before I, started doing the podcast, 7 years ago. And I'll tell you the same exact thing I said there. There is no such thing as console wars. There really isn't. There's no winner and a loser. Oh, there is a winner, and it's us. It's the gamers. We always win. Every single time every single time a new console comes out, like a real console. We're not talking about fucking Stadia or any of that bullshit. Fucking the UA, remember that shit? How that was going to be the big thing? That died in half a second, and the Stadia died even faster. Because, who the fuck's gonna buy that? There's no market for that. It's stupid. Anywho, fuck the Stadia. It's a piece of shit. Anyone who thought that was gonna go anywhere, I don't know what to tell you, man. I don't know what to tell you. You have poor judge of a lot of things. So, we're talking about the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. Yes, it's a stupid name. So was Xbox One. So was Wii U. Well, PlayStation was just just throw the next number on. Just throw the next number on. Whatever. Everyone has their own strategies. In the new 3DS, that was maybe the dumbest one. And then, people confusing the Series X and the Series S with the Xbox One S and the Xbox One X. There are dumb decisions out there. I'll give everybody that. But, let's take a look at the consoles, because, I got a lot of numbers. We have a lot of numbers to talk about. I got a lot of things that people aren't going to really agree with, but I got the numbers to back it up, all right? So, let's take a look at, how these consoles stack up head-to-head, because that's what people are wondering, right? People are wondering, which one do I buy? Well, as has been the case since the dawn of time, this is our 9th generation of consoles, and the easy answer is you just buy both of them. Obviously there hasn't only been 2 consoles or even 3 consoles every single generation, but just get all the consoles. I don't really know why people always want to make a war out of this, or Xbox better, PlayStation's better. Then you have 90% of people PC. None of those arguments make sense. Absolutely not a single one of them. There's no reason why, Xbox is the best, PlayStation is the best, PC is the best, you only need one, you don't need 2, blah, blah, blah. Just get them all. I know that's, these things cost money and they're expensive. Trust me, I know. I'm not rolling in the dough, but I have an Xbox One and I have a PlayStation 4, and I played them both because, I play video games, and, while these things cost, $500 if you take a look at the next generation here, gaming is the cheapest investment for a hobby that you can make. Take a look at the biggest games out there. They're all free. So many of the biggest games, the most played games, the most streamed games, they cost $0.00 to download and play for free with no pay to win systems in there, right? So the value in gaming is incredible. You take a look at, any game sale or the amount of content that you can get from a $60 game or a $50 game, $20 game, those indie games that people play over and over again that just cost $15. Gaming is such a very, very smart money investment because when you take a look at any of their hobbies, they're not going to be as cost effective as video games. So, because you just got to buy the one console, and then you get a bunch of free games. You have the service, which also comes with free games that you have to pay for the service, obviously, and then you got your games that are anywhere between typically from the major releases. They're usually anywhere between $40 to $60, and then you have the smaller releases that can kind of vary everywhere, whether they be small indie market things or like side stories from AAA developers and publishers. So it's cost effective. So saying that buying them all or buying a single console is not worth it, and then you take a look at consoles and their price, like $500. That is incredibly less than a single graphics card for a PC. So I don't I don't want to hear any arguments about like, the price points when you have people, killing each other over getting a 3070 or 3080 new graphics card. You could buy both these consoles for the price of a graphics card and a shitty processor. That's how expensive PC gaming is. You can get a PC that can run some games at very, very low settings for $500. The current PC I built myself cost around that much. It was more like $600 just 4 years ago when I built the damn thing. And that couldn't compete then, and it can't compete now. And I'm not even talking about like the new graphics cards. If you buy the old generation of graphics cards, that's still hundreds of dollars more than the Xbox Series X or the PlayStation 5. So, and people are tripping over themselves trying to get these things. And we'll talk about graphics here in just a little bit, mostly due to the part of like how much they matter, how much people care, and what the numbers show us. We know that, people are going to buy up all the 3080s and 3070s that they can possibly get their hands on. People always are going to want to get the highest end graphics cards. And of course, the people where this is their job makes more sense because, they may be streaming from one single PC. Of course, most of your big people are operating with 2, maybe even 3 PCs, where one you're playing the game, the second one you're streaming the game, and the third one you're recording the game for your YouTube uploads or something like that. So like, I'm not talking about those few awesome people that make a fairly good living playing video games. That kind of investment absolutely makes sense. But for the people that are buying 3080s just to play Among Us with that's your prerogative. You can do what you want. Obviously you can only have your graphics as good as the game allows them to be, and people will. The majority of people are PC players. Let's be honest. The majority of people play on PC. You take a look at the numbers. It's not console anymore, and I think that's just going to keep, being the same more and more and more. With the PC mustard race people, thinking that their shit is always going to be superior, when it's not. It all comes down to the thing that we use these machines for, right? It's the video games. It's the video games that matter. You cannot play Smash Brothers on a PC. You can't play Uncharted 4 on the PC. You can't play. The PC can't play everything, and it doesn't matter. Xbox can't play Mario Kart. PlayStation can't play Halo. It all depends on the games. Everything is game dependent. You can play fucking Among Us and Minecraft and Fortnite and Call of Duty on your fucking phone, right? So, and those things make more money than everything else, right? So I know Among Us is free on the phone, but I'm just saying, a lot of the biggest stuff, it doesn't really matter where they come from. And obviously we have crossplay, which makes the console that you choose even less important, especially since we're getting crossplay from the PlayStation side of things. We know Sony's been really, really not wanting to play with other people. That's just the way that company operates. You can think that's smart, or you can be a normal person and think that's dumb. Because Sony doesn't want people to play with Xbox players or whatever. When Xbox is like, yeah, fine, we'll play with PC players, play with PlayStation players, it's fine. And obviously, we just got the crossplay with Apex Legends, and you have the keyboard and mouse people and auto aim, blah 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 blah, mudding up the works. The point is, more people are able to play with more of their friends, regardless of if they're on their phone, on their PC, on their PlayStation, on their Xbox. I know obviously Nintendo isn't able to compete in a lot of those arenas. They don't get the third-party titles ever since the tail end of the Wii, because it just wasn't cost effective, because, you know, that's just not where their clientele are buying their games, right? You're not going to find Madden on the Nintendo Switch, because that's not where people played it on the Wii. Therefore, they stopped making it on the Wii U, and, you know, that's just going to continue. But obviously, you have fucking Animal Crossing, which just fucking owned every other game this year when it came to like publicity and the memes and the coverage and the content. Not so much the sales, but obviously, you know, it sold like, you know, what, 12 million units or whatever. That's absolutely crazy. And of course, you're going to have your indie hits that come out of nowhere. Among Us was nothing for a couple of years, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, becomes the biggest freaking game in the universe, right? And that's only a couple of bucks on PC and is free on handheld. And then you have something like Phasmophobia, that, you know, that just became like the biggest spooky game of the year. That was developed by one guy who figured that maybe that the servers for day one will be good at 500, and then you have 2 million players every day. So there's no way to predict how things are going to go, especially with the way that, you know, advertising works and streaming. Companies are getting a little bit smarter, but they're always going to be playing behind, because, you know, it's the fat cats in their big suits thinking that they know how the world works, and then a dude on a skateboard fucking drinking ocean spray becomes the biggest thing in the world, and like, you can't make that kind of publicity. You can't make that. And then all of a sudden, you know, all the streams for that song and Ocean Spray, everyone starts, you know, recreating it. And it's crazy. That's the kind of stuff you can't predict. That's the kind of publicity you can't buy. You know, Among Us is a crazy thing because it was, nobody was playing it for years, or at least a year. I think it was 2 years. It was out before it started becoming ginormous. So, you know, always be aware that there's no way we can see where the landscape is shifting. And then you have, you know, your big games that come out of nowhere, and then, you know, we'll slowly go from one platform to another platform, gets remasters, all these other things. But let's take a look at the comparisons, because that's what everyone gets talking about, right? So we'll go to the comparisons and we'll tell you what matters and what doesn't matter. So first of all, we got the price, right? $500 for the Series X and the PS5. And then you have the Series S, which is $300, and then you have the discless PS5 for $400. So that's quite the disparity right there. Obviously, both companies were waiting for the other to put their price out first so that they could match or undercut it. But then Xbox got leaked, so they said, shit, well, okay, here we go, here it is. Which definitely surprised Sony with that $300 Xbox Series S. So obviously they had to match the Series X with the PS5 price with the disc version. So they had to match that. They couldn't go higher. A lot of this has to do with marketing, more so marketing than anything else. We saw what happened with Xbox One versus PlayStation 4, which, if you're not aware, the latest numbers, which I think we only have from July of this year, PlayStation 4 has sold 112 million units versus Xbox One's 50. So it's selling it more than 2-1. And a lot of that has to do with the start. Consoles don't really care about, you know, processing power or graphics. It's all about the games and the experience of them. And a lot of that also has to do with publicity. You know, the Wii, everybody was trying to get their hands on it, right? It was like the hottest thing in the world, and people couldn't find it even for a couple of years afterwards. And that became, you know, the biggest selling thing. Xbox 360 got off to a huge lead on PlayStation 3, a lot of it because of that price point, even though the PlayStation 3 was more powerful, and it was the bigger, chonkier boy, and it was coming off of a more successful console, the most successful console of all time, the PlayStation 2, at 155 million units, where the original Xbox was just 24 million units. And then all of a sudden, that 24 million jumps up to 84 million on the 360, and the PlayStation 2 went down from 155 to the PS3, which kind of really eventually caught up to the 360. 360 was up ahead. It came out a year sooner, remember? And it was also cheaper. So Xbox 360 got up to a big lead, and slowly every single year for the next 7 years, the PlayStation 3, it was catching up, and at the end, they'd caught up and were basically the same. So who was the winner in that win? Who was it? It was us. It was us, the gamers, the people that played them and bought them both and got to experience all the games. Remember, the Xbox One came out in 2013. The PS4 came out in 2013. That was 7 years of games that we had. It was worth the price at this point. And a lot of it comes down to, even if you are going to get them both, sometimes it's which am I going to get first? Which has a lot to do with publicity, right? You take a look at, launch titles, the pricing point, as well as sometimes the features of this game. And then you had a lot of disinformation about the Xbox One. You saw those Polygon articles that completely destroyed it before it could even come out. It took all these things out of context about what the console was capable of doing, and it made people really worried about like having to connect to the internet. God forbid a console connect to the internet. That's fucking crazy. I know, right? So that made PlayStation 4 the winner before either console even came out, because of all that hate and vitriol that came from that lowered that 35 million console difference between where the 360 ended and where the Xbox One is right now. And then you have the PlayStation 4. So PlayStation 3 was more powerful than the 360. 360 beat it all the way up until the end where they tied. Xbox One, PlayStation 4, they're both more powerful in different things. So that's not the thing that we need to gauge things on. So let's take a look at those specs, because the Series X is the more powerful console, right? They both have 8-core CPUs, but the Series X is 3.8 gigahertz, while the PS5 is 3.5 gigahertz. The Series X has 12.0 teraflops from their GPU, and the PS5 only has 10.3. So that's a 1.7 difference, and that's actually bigger if you actually look at the math of what the GPU does and how many operations that allows than it looks like, right? They have the same exact RAM, and neither is going to win any points on storage. Basically, both a terabyte. PlayStation 5 is actually smaller at 825 gigabytes, and then obviously you have to take the operating system cut out of that. You take the operating system cut out of the Xbox One, and that was around 800 something gigabytes that we already know that about. So already, no matter what number you look at, the Xbox Series X is going to have a slight edge in storage, although both don't have that much storage. And obviously you have the proprietary tiny terabyte memory cards that you can chuck in the back that are actually super duper fast and work very, very well, but that's another $200. So there really isn't a point, honestly, to getting the Series S unless it's just your secondary console for Xbox only exclusives. But if you're looking for the Xbox to be your primary console, you're going to need that memory. I have an external hard drive on my Xbox One. My PS4 doesn't have one, and it can only hold fucking 7 games. So I have to keep deleting and re-downloading stuff because that also has a smaller memory than the base of the Xbox One. So neither's going to win any points on memory. We can kind of call that one a tie, even though Xbox Series S is a bit bigger. Both can go up to 8K with the resolution. Both can go up to 120 FPS, which you don't, honestly, all the PC mustard race people, you don't need more than that. And they both have, obviously, 4K, UHD Blu-rays. And obviously, the discless PS5 doesn't have that, and the Series S doesn't have that, but the Series X does. So if you're looking for this to be your home units, you're gonna want the disc drive. And then obviously the Xbox Series X is going to have the edge up on the PlayStation 5 when it comes to backwards compatibility. Any disc that can work on the Xbox One works on the Series X. Any of those 360 discs, any of those Xbox One discs, they all work on the Series X. PS5 can make most PS4 games work, essentially any of the ones that you care about, but nothing before that. A PS3 disc will not work on PS5, whereas a 360 disc will work on a Series X. And obviously, the Xbox has a bigger backwards compatibility backlog of that's obviously was already instituted for the Xbox One. So everything that worked on the Xbox One can work on the Series X. PS5 does not have that from everything that worked on the PS4. But let's take a look at backwards compatibility, because this is actually a very hot button issue that not a lot of people really realize. Because we saw this last generation of consoles was first announced, people were talking about backwards compatibility and how like neither was backwards compatible and how it was terrible, and it was the most requested feature, right? We heard like Phil Spencer was like, it was the most requested feature, and then like it was announced, and Xbox slowly started rolling that out, and then obviously you have the digital games on both PlayStation and Xbox of older consoles, and that, usually at a much lower price, depending on the franchise, and obviously you have sales and whatnot, and sometimes we had collections, sometimes we had remasters. But when you take a look at the numbers, the estimated share of time spent on Xbox One content, because that's the info that I have. I don't know if anybody has ever collected the data or if Sony has ever released the data on the PS4. But if you take a look at Xbox One, where most people were, we want backwards compatibility. Yes, a lot of people say that they want it, but do they actually use it? The answer is astoundingly no. So if you take a look at the estimated share of time spent on Xbox Ones, 1.5% of user time is on Xbox 360 games, which is easily not worth the time and money that Microsoft spent for that feature. But what did it get them? It gave them publicity. And that's really where backwards compatibility comes into factoring into sales. It's all about publicity. It's like when you're going camping and you're packing everything up, like, oh, we can pack this so we can play this game, we can pack this in case we want to do this, and then you get there and you don't end up, touching, half of the shit that you brought, right? It's the exact same with consoles. People are like, oh man, it's got backwards compatibility so I can play all these old games. You're not going to. The numbers show that almost nobody plays backwards compatible games on their consoles. That's just what the numbers show. The numbers aren't lying. Yes, maybe you do. Hell, I played an Xbox 360 game on my Xbox One yesterday. It was N7 day, and I was playing Mass Effect 3 because I love that game and playing it for that specific day, right? But I hardly played any 360 games. I played a few, probably more than most people, but still, 1.5% of my time? Probably. That sounds about right. You take a look at 54.7% of the time is spent playing Xbox One games, 16.5% on Netflix, 6.7% on TV app, 6.6% on YouTube, 14.1% in other games, and I'm sure that's changed with Disney Plus and other streaming services starting to compete better with Netflix over the last few years. So obviously those numbers, a little bit tweaked. But let's double the amount. Let's say 3% of time is used on 360 games. That's still not even a 20th of the time that you would be spending on current console games. And obviously your Xbox players and your PlayStation players aren't, the North and the South fighting each other with extreme differences. Gamers are gamers, man. We're all pretty much the same, especially when you get a large sample size. So, the PlayStation people aren't going to be that different when it comes to the backwards compatibility time spent. 1.5% of your time is spent, of gamers, is spent playing backwards compatible games. That might seem lower than you would think. And it's not enough to make the cost of all of that work. Because remember, the Xbox One was not designed for backwards compatibility to be a thing. They had to kind of work it out. They had to invent new shit for that stuff to work. And they made constant updates, adding to the library. And the Xbox Series X is going to get the fruits of that labor day one. And PlayStation 5 will be able to play... Let's for argument's sake play all of the PlayStation 4 library, but not the PlayStation 3. So you could say oh, that's a huge thing because you can have more backwards compatibility with the Series X and the PS5. But people honestly don't really play backwards compatibility games that much. Yes, it will be more so at launch with these games than at any other time in history, because PS5 launch, what has it got? Demon Souls. It's it's got Miles Morales. Yeah, that's also on PlayStation 4. So it's it's a part of both generations, right? But it's not an exclusive. You have one game. The Xbox was going to have one game, but they don't have it because of COVID. So so Halo Infinite isn't out, and that seems to be a big gap missing So if you take like, it's such a weak launch for one or both consoles because they don't have exclusives. If you take a look, honestly, Google the launch titles of most let's say the most recent few generations. They aren't that good. They really aren't that good. There may be one that you really loved, or one that you played a lot, or a couple that stood the test of time, but what is one or two games really going to make that big of a difference? It's just kind of like a fun little publicity thing. That's kind of like, you can buy this new console to play this new game that you need the new console for, right? That's what we're all used to. But for these upcoming consoles, we don't really have that. And obviously, most people aren't even having the consoles because either, they're waiting because they don't have the exclusives yet, and it costs a lot of money, or more so over, people can't get these consoles because there's not going to be as much due to the COVID pandemic, really hurting the production process, as well as getting as many out. So, this might probably be the most difficult launch to get a console for actually any three of the platforms, because we know how difficult it's been to get a Nintendo Switch, especially since the pandemic and Animal Crossing New Horizons hit. Those things were getting scalped like crazy, and they're probably still hard to find. And obviously we have the holiday season, which is only going to exacerbate the demand. Obviously, there's always going to be a demand, no matter what, for any sort of gaming technology, whether it be a console or a graphics card or a peripheral or whatever, give and take a few here or there. When it comes to the major ones, they're tried and true. Your Sonys, your Microsofts, your Nintendos. This might be the most difficult launch and most difficult year, because obviously the Switch has been out for a couple of years, but they're still not easy to come by, and because of the myriad of reasons that I've already stated. So if you look at the price points, it's either a tie or Xbox has the advantage, because their cheaper discless version is $100 cheaper than the discless version of the PS5. You can also argue that the discless version of the PS5 is more powerful than the Series S, and yes, it is. You could also take a look at all of the graphical capabilities and say that even though the Xbox Series S is a more powerful system, we have to have the games to take advantage of those, and if they're going to be available on both consoles, then the games won't take advantage of the power of the Series X, because the PS5 won't be able to match that power, so they have to make the game be able to run on both systems. So you're going to have to rely on exclusives for the Series X to take advantage of that power, which might obviously not happen right away or really matter all that much to us. We're going to have the ray tracing. We're going to have the 4K up to 8K support. Most people don't have 4K TVs. Most people don't have 4K monitors. Obviously, the smaller you get, the more expensive it's going to be. But the vast majority of people can't even play on 4K. But the last console lasted us 7 years, whether you have the PS4 or the Xbox One. We won't count the Wii U because that didn't even last that long before Nintendo was like, we need to make some changes, because that was terrible. And then they came out with this really crazy hybrid console, and it was gangbusters, right? So it's going to take a long time for the PS5 or the Series X to catch up to the Nintendo Switch, which is already at an estimated 68 million units, which is already ahead of what will, as of 2 days from now, be last generation's Xbox One. And obviously the PlayStation 5 will take a long time to catch up to those numbers as well, because it had 3 years, and it's the second most successful. It will be the second most successful Nintendo console ever. It's already it's already the second most successful console ever, but the third biggest product. If you take out the Game Boy Advance and the 3DS, the Switch hasn't passed them, but it will in less than a year, and will only be trailing the Wii, which of course sold 101 million units. And then that just leaves the Game Boy at 118 and the DS at 154. It probably won't pass the DS. It might not pass the Game Boy, but that's definitely feasible You would just have to double the current units for the Switch. Yes, it's been out for 3 years, so the install base has, the bulk of the units for the rest of time have already been sold 3 years into the darn thing. But of course, they're going to come out with another more powerful version probably. Obviously, they came out with the portable only version, and there's going to be new games that come out that are obviously going to drive people to buy an extra one or their first one, which, always happens with every single console. So you take a look at the numbers and you take a look at the graphical power that these two new consoles have. It doesn't really matter. They're both like Xbox One and PS4 both had a little bit edges on each other. One was faster at processing, one had a little bit better GPU, one was a little better bandwidth wise. They're very comparable, very, very comparable. You can't really outright say that one is easily better than the other. Like you could say the PS3 was stronger than the 360, or that, the Series X is easily stronger than the PS5 in every single category. The PS5 doesn't have an edge anywhere, unlike where the PS4 had on the Xbox One, where they kind of traded off. They're basically capable of the same stuff. And when it comes down to it, the PS5 and the Series X will be capable of the same stuff just because of the fact that most of your games are not exclusive. I take a look at my discs that I have over here in my little media tower. Most of my games I do get on disc because it's cheaper than digital. For new games, that is. Obviously, when it comes to, after a while and sales and stuff, digital is going to be cheaper. And yes, things will always typically be cheaper on PC. Yes, I do know that. And I am getting a new PC as well as hopefully at some point this year getting a Series X. I'll probably eventually get a PS5, just like I knew I'll eventually get a PS4, because I needed my Naughty Dog games, right? I take a look at both consoles. Both consoles had 4 exclusive games that I bought and played a lot. All right, so and obviously, maybe you really, really care about Final Fantasy, which actually did end up coming. Well, all the Square Enix stuff really started coming to the Xbox over the past couple of years. But let's say you really, really care about a certain exclusive for Sony or for Microsoft, or you care more about a series on one and you don't really care about any of the other series on the other. That makes the decision super easy for you, and you aren't even worried about it. Well, I don't think most people are worried. They just are kind of like pretend that they are. A lot of people did switch from the PS2 to the 360 as their main console, right? The numbers show that because, 10 million new people weren't born and decided to play video games while a bunch of others just retired after the PlayStation 2 or whatever. So we know a lot of people switched. And then you take a look at PlayStation 3 and 360 to Xbox One and PS4. Obviously, a lot of people switched there as well. Most people were on PS2, then most people were on 360. And now most people are on PS4. Maybe most people will be on Series X, maybe most people will be on Series 5. The smart money is probably on 5. I mean, you take a look at the PlayStation family, it doesn't, when it does lose, it catches up. So, and it's obviously the older console, and with the older console, you're going to have older franchises and more people attached to those franchises. And that's a perfectly reasonable explanation to buy anything. People love Mario, they're going to buy the Nintendo product. That's just obvious. If you love Halo, you're going to buy an Xbox. If you love, your Sackboys, you're going to buy PlayStation. We do see certain titles get brief console exclusivity, and then you see consoles that launch on one, and then the developer, because especially when you go to the lower indie devs, they choose to either just be on PC, or they choose to be on just a single console and PC, or just a single console, because that's what's within their scope, that's what's within their budget. And then once it becomes more successful, then they're able to branch out to more consoles, even if it takes 2-3 years down the line for that successful indie title to come out to another console. That stuff does happen. But if you really need Ori and the Blind Forest, then you get the Xbox. If you really need your Naughty Dog games, your Last of Us's, your Uncharted's, That's why I got a PS4. I was like, I'm going to wait till Uncharted 4 comes out and I get the PS4. And it happens and I get it. Simple. Easy. I know what I want and I know, when to get it. There's no reason to get a PS5 or a Series X unless you're one of those people who's like, oh, I need the 3090 right now. I need to have the top of the line stuff. I need to play the newest things on the newest consoles. That's totally fine. Like I said before, this is a perfectly viable monetarily hobby, and it doesn't pay for itself, obviously, unless it's your job, in which case, you have to stay on top of things, but it's worth the investment with the amount of time that you get out of these things. So, I got 4 good exclusives on the Xbox One that I played, but I bought the PS4 specifically for those exclusives because I knew the Xbox was going to be my main console of choice. I prefer the Xbox, personally. The Xbox One has a better controller than the PlayStation 4. PlayStation 4 has a great controller. A big step up over the DualShock 3, the DualShock 4 is. But like with their tiny buttons and their tiny triggers, it can get a little crampy, especially if I'm playing like a Call of Duty. When I played the open beta that came at first on PlayStation, it was cramping my fingers because of these tiny little triggers. It wasn't the controller is literally not as ergonomical as the Xbox One, and it just fits better with my hands, my human hands, and it's more comfortable. And obviously, they have the more elite quote unquote controller, and their elite controllers, they're easily better than the PlayStation 4 ones when it comes to the proprietary controllers. Obviously, you can get a modded scuff controller for anything that you want, but when it comes to the proprietary stuff made by the companies, Xbox has the edge, obviously, because they choose to. There is no elite DualShock controller that gives us all the different knobs and whistles that we do want. Obviously, if you like the modularity, or if you want the triggers on the back, or the things, paddles on the back, which is what I use them for. And this is not an endorsement of those controllers. They all break super quickly, super easily. But it's what I'm used to, and it's what I need to game comfortably nowadays. And I can work around those broken bumpers by using all 4 paddles. So that's how things work out with me. I think it's a better controller. Achievements are by far better than trophies. You can't argue that. Platinum trophy is kind of nice because that's a tangible thing of completing a game, whereas you don't get a specific reward for 100%ing an Xbox game. But you have the score. Score is so much better than you got the bronze trophies and the silver trophies and the gold trophies and the platinum trophies. It's like everybody knows that the gamer score system is way better than the trophy system, and Nintendo hasn't even tried because it's Nintendo. Obviously, they're always going to be behind on everything, especially when it comes to internet capability or their UI or their store or stuff like that. I think the PlayStation Store is a little bit better than the Xbox Store. But the UI overall, I think is better on the Xbox. The PlayStation has gotten better over time. Especially from PS3 to PS4, even though they are very, very similar, or even the Vita and the PSP, those also had very similar interfaces, from the PSP to the PS3 and the Vita to the PS4, very similar, cross-platform there from their handhelds, of course, which we'll probably never see another handheld from Sony again. So Microsoft obviously is never going to make one, and Switch or Nintendo has hit it big with this whole hybrid thing. So we'll see how that pans out in another 6 years or 5 years, whenever Nintendo makes their next console. They're going to be at the forefront once again. They were the first for the 8th generation with the Wii U. They're the first in the 9th generation with the Nintendo Switch. And they'll be first in the 10th generation. That's just the way that things have lined up with the success of the Wii, and then the lack of success with the Wii U, and then the success of the Switch. So it's everything's all got to do with the market, right? But when it comes to the PlayStations and the Xboxes, they've synced up. They've synced up, and they kind of see themselves as the only competition, because when it comes to like your third-party games, they come out on those two, and then usually PC, although not all the time. And then sometimes Nintendo gets it, if it's like, you know, a Minecraft or a Fortnite, you know, the big ones that like you have to have it everywhere because you can afford it and you're a huge company and you're a huge success and you're going to pay for it. Especially since now, you know, as opposed to the Wii U, the Switch has such a large install base that it absolutely makes sense and has invested a lot of money in their indie market, and which is also going to be really, really great when it comes to the handheld mode, right? Where you're not going to need the graphic capabilities as much or the resolution, right? So when it comes down to things, price is an important thing for people, but when it comes to the PlayStation for the Xbox, you know, the flagship ones are the same price. The disc versions are not. So when it comes to the sales, I think that's definitely going to, you know, when it comes to the Christmas time where the parents decide what they're going to get their kids, that might not factor so much this year because of COVID and the lack of consoles that they're going to have. And Sony has come out and said that you cannot go to a store and buy PlayStation 5 on the day of launch. That will not be a thing that can happen. They can only do the online sales. There will not be any PlayStations in store unless you had them sent there for your pre-order for the pickup delivery. There will not be any in-house to sell. And while Microsoft, you know, comes out a few days earlier, they have not announced if there will be any in-store or not, which is a little bit surprising, especially since it comes out sooner and Sony has already come out to say that. So we don't have either console right now. The Xbox One and the PlayStation 5, they're big boys. They're large heckin' chonkers, right? People make fun of. They've really made fun of both of them, more so the Xbox Series X because we got to see what it was first. There's tons of memes. Refrigerator, PS5 is Kaiba, Soto Kaiba, right? You know, they're big boys. The Xbox One is smaller. It's not as long in the vertical mode, and it's not as wide in the horizontal mode where you kind of just have to really tip them over. It seems like the PS5's base is modular that way, where it can be on the bottom or on the side. And the Xbox One, while it's a thick boy, thicker than the PS4, you know, on the sides by a little bit, you know, might not fit in every single little shelf that you have, but if you can fit your Xbox One in there, you'll probably be able to fit the Series X down there. It can fit on its side. The PS5 can fit on its side. It is bigger, so it's going to be harder to fit in most cases than the Series X, if that's something that you care about. A lot of people tend to focus more so on the look of the console than is necessary. It's just kind of a nice thing if you think it looks nice or not. Some people don't like the way the Xbox looks. Some people don't like the way the PS5 looks. Some people like the way they both look or whatever. That shit doesn't matter. It all is about the games. That is the thing that matters. The games and your gaming experience, right? You know, each console has different things for it. But when it comes down to it, it's all about the games. And you know, like, I'm not even counting like remasters towards like, you know, exclusives, even though they are exclusives, but they're rehashes of old games. So like Miles Morales, Spider-Man, I'm currently in my first playthrough of the first Marvel Spider-Man that came out 2 years ago, and I'm loving it, and I'm going to get the Miles Morales game, but I'm just going to get it on PS4 because I plan on getting the Series X first, and I don't need a PS5 to play the Miles Morales Spider game. Honestly, I don't need the Series X to play anything because it doesn't have anything yet. PS5 doesn't have anything but Demon Souls or a better looking Miles Morales Spider-Man game, right? So there isn't a reason that you need to get either of them immediately. You probably couldn't anyway with the limited supplies that they are in right now, unless you're those people that, you know, I just need to have the top of the line stuff as soon as possible. That's totally fine. If you want to wait for Halo Infinite to come out before you get your Xbox, totally normal. Makes perfect sense. If you want to wait, like me, until there's an exclusive on the PS5 that you absolutely need to play, I needed to play Uncharted 4. So I waited until it came out. Then I got my PS4, which was bundled with the Uncharted remaster trilogy bundle on a Black Friday 4 or 5 years ago or whatever it was. So, you know, until the games that you need to play come out, you could totally wait, you know, and obviously you know that. Or if you have a $2,000, $3,000 PC and all you care about is the PC games, that's totally fine. Even if you own an Xbox One or PlayStation 4, even more so because there's not going to be much coming out. We know it was announced that there aren't going to be exclusives for, at least a year on the Xbox side of things. And, that makes sense. And when it comes down to the business side of things, everything is making sense to how things are marketed, where things are priced, and how the consoles are built. Everything makes sense from the 360 to the PS3 to Wii U was a bit of a gamble. The Switch was a bit of a gamble, but it paid off big, right? So it all depends on your preferences, and there doesn't have to be a console war. There doesn't have to be a winner because, even in like the 360 PS3 in the 7th generation era, if you called a winner as the 360 because, it came out sooner and had more games and was more successful and sold more, then you're missing part of the picture where the PS3 slowly but surely catches up. And once PS4 and Xbox One come out, 360 and PS3 are at a dead even heat of sales figures. So, or if like before they come out, you did announce PS3 is the winner because it's the more powerful console. More powerful console doesn't matter. The PS3 was more powerful, but it was beat up by the 360 for a number of years until it caught up. The Xbox One, more powerful console in some ways than the PS4. PS4 more powerful in some ways, but you had a lot of those questionable articles that came out that gave a lot of people pause on continuing with the Xbox family, where their 360 was their main console or their only console, and they switched over to PS4. There's a lot of people that have that, and some people care about, a lot of people care about, especially if you're a child, what is it that everyone else is playing? Because that tends to be the biggest driver, is what is everyone else playing? Damn, everyone's playing Animal Crossing. I need to buy a Switch and play Animal Crossing. That was millions of people this year went through that exact thing. They didn't have it for Smash. They didn't have it for Mario Kart or Mario Odyssey or Breath of the Wild. Animal Crossing came out and they're like, holy shit, I love Animal Crossing. This is what I was waiting for, and now I'm going to get it. Or, holy shit, everyone's playing this game from this franchise that I've never played before. It looks super fun and cute and cool. I'm going to get it. That was literally millions of people this very year. So that's the kind of stuff that matters. That's the kind of stuff that matters. It's about what other people are playing, right? So there are kids like, oh man, I don't know what console to get because I don't know what my friends are going to get. Well, and then there's all this hullabaloo. It's like, oh, you have to be on the internet if you're on the Xbox One. So a lot of people are like, oh, panic mode, buy the PS4. That worked. That absolutely worked. And, that's going to have the bigger population. So when you have your third-party titles, like your Battlefronts or your Call of Duties or your Overwatches, whatever, some people want to go with the console that has a larger population because the matchmaking might be faster. Who knows if how much that could be true because there's more people online, or that's where most of your friends are, but not all of your friends. And that's something that we will all have to deal with. But it's less and less a thing because of crossplay. If I'm on Fortnite, I can play on the PS4. I can play on the Xbox. I can play on the Switch. I can play on the PC. I can play on the mobile and play with anybody on any of the other platforms. If I'm on Call of Duty, I play on my Xbox because it works, and my PC wouldn't be able to run it, and I can play with my friends on PC. Or if I'm on Spellbreak, I can play with my friends on Switch if I'm on Xbox. So we have less of those kind of things to worry about with cross-platform, and so many of the games that have been talked about for this 9th generation of consoles that's about to come out, so many of them concentrating. We got cross-platform play, a cross-generational play to help fill that gap, with games that might come out in the next year on both the next generation and the ending generation, so we don't have to worry about lower populations for the newer consoles because we'll be able to play with people who have the older consoles as well. So that's something we have to worry less and less about. When it comes to pricing, PC's got those Steam sales, right? PlayStation has better sales than Xbox. obviously. You just look at the stores, but Xbox has gotten a little bit better every year or so. Although I still think PlayStation tends to have better sales overall on average, and then PC has its sales, and sometimes a game is going to run better on console than it does on PC. Sometimes a game is going to run better on PC than it does on console. So if you're like me and you just like video games and you play all the video games on all the platforms, the ones that matter, the 3 consoles and the PC, or, you can throw the phone in there if it's a phone exclusive, obviously. Otherwise, I'm just going to play it on something I can look at a bigger screen with a better controlling scheme. That's if that's what you are like as well, someone who plays kind of everything, then a lot of those things don't really matter to you, and you just kind of, like, okay, I'll wait until I get either one, or, oh, I know I'm going to get this one because it's my main one, and then I'll get the other one at some other time, right? I prefer console gaming myself over PC playing because every single console game works. Every single one. If a game comes out for the PlayStation, it's going to work on my PlayStation. If a game comes out on the Xbox, it's going to work on my Xbox. Fucking flawlessly. It's going to work. If a game comes out for PC, it almost doesn't matter who you are, unless you're someone who has a shit ton of money and can always buy the newest stuff. You always have to look up, can my PC run this? And then, like, what settings am I going to have to run it on, right? I can play Apex on my PC. It has to be at the lowest settings, and it's still going to have, a little bit of problems, but it's going to look way better on my Xbox. It's going to look way better on my PlayStation 4. Because console gaming is cheaper. It literally is cheaper. We talked about this at the very beginning. The PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X are $500. You can't even get a good graphics card for that amount of money. You can get a decent one. You can't get a really good one. And the Series X and the PS5 are going to have very comparable graphics to what people are running right now in their PCs, because the GPU is going to be 10.3 teraflops AMD RDNA 2 for the PS5 and 12.0 teraflop AMD RDNA 2 for the Xbox Series X. And then you have both are 8 cores, PlayStation 3.5 gigahertz, and the Xbox is 3.8 gigahertz. So that is, if you try to get those numbers on a PC, you're looking at $1,800, without a huge sale for a PC, maybe $1,600 at the least, I would think. A terabyte of even just a terabyte of storage with a graphics card that is in a processor that is comparable to what these consoles that are coming out in the next week can have. It's at least triple the price if you want to get it from a PC. And PC players have to worry about crashes way more often than console players. They just do. I myself, when I play on PC, I have to worry more about crashes. Anybody else who plays on PC, even if they have the most expensive $1 trillion PCs, they have to worry more about crashes than anybody on any console does, right? That's just how things are. Arkham City ran better on consoles than it did on PC because it came out on consoles first. It was developed for consoles, and then they had to, make it for the PC, and it didn't work as well because it wasn't made specifically for the PC. They took a console-made game and tried to transfer it over, and sometimes that's not always a great process. But if I want to get all the frames to take advantage of some things in some games, obviously PC is going to be better. If the PC is top of the line and you don't experience problems, you're going to have a way better experience in some cases than you could ever have on console. If you have all the right stuff, you have all the right screens, with that can produces, all the frames and all the gigahertz and all the resolutions. But you still can't play Mario Kart on it, still can't play Smash on it, still can't play Halo on it until probably a few years later, like you did with the Master Chief or things like that. So, even when it comes to power or pricing, each is going to have a little bit of give and take, but console is going to be way, way, way better production for the money. So console is always going to have that because that's just business. You're going to sell. We for the last 3 or 4 generations, every console has sold at a loss, but they make up for it with their their sales of their own proprietary games as well as their own online services. PC, you don't have to pay for a service unless you're on, World of Warcraft or whatever. But, you're still going to have your battle passes if you choose to pay for those, or any other microtransactions that you have that you would in any way have to do if you played it on console. So no platform is perfect. No platform is going to have every single thing you want, unless like the only thing you care about is Animal Crossing. Then you just get a Switch and you're Gucci, because that's the only thing that can play Animal Crossing. So that does matter to some people, and that is a factor that comes into sales. That's really all I have to say about that. The numbers back up. The publicity is something that matters, whether you like it or not. People say they care about backwards compatibility when the numbers show, the data shows that 1.5% of people's time is playing backwards compatibility games. And yes, I know, and I have mentioned this before, that will be different for this coming generation for the first few months, at least for the rest of this year and most of Q1, probably even Q2 of next year, as we're going to have games that come out on both generations, both platforms, within the same family, or are just going to be a while before there becomes exclusives. But there will be. There will be. You don't have to I'll wait out the entire generation to see if something's worth it. Something's probably going to be worth it. Like, if you really like video games, one of these is going to be worth your time. Maybe you're just good with the Switch. Maybe you're just good with your PC. And that's totally fine. Hell, maybe you're just good on your phone. Clearly, hundreds of millions of people are, right? So, hey, we're all gamers. We all love video games. So let's just play video games. There is no console war. Sonic and Mario aren't fighting anymore with blast processing and plumber power or whatever. That's not a thing anymore, guys. There is no console war. Just get both. Or, wait until you get either. Or get one and wait till you get the other. Or maybe you're just good with what you have. Maybe you only play PC games. Maybe you only play Nintendo games. That's up to you, the consumer, and the numbers show that as well. So, let me know what you guys think about what is up and coming, and what influences your decisions when it comes to gaming as a whole. Whether it comes to digital versus physical, you got obviously when it comes to like collector's editions or stuff, that's typically only going to be physical, so that has a bit of an edge if you like collecting those statues and patches and various things. Or if you're just like, I just love beastly RGB PCs on a 6 monitors. That's totally cool. So let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch you next time.